Now, in the ongoing drive to reduce our energy bills and at the same time help save the planet, there have been lots of initiatives designed to persuade us all to make our homes more efficient. And very often, one particular solution to that has been offered with what seems to be an unbeatable incentive. You can have it installed in your house for free. The trouble is, years later, that irresistible offer has come back to haunt some of the people who took it up. Because while it may have cost nothing to put it in, if it somehow ends up causing a problem, or perhaps should never have been installed in the first place, it could cost you an awful lot of money and indeed frustration to get it taken out. In the construction boom of the 1960s and 70s, millions of homes just like this sprang up in new communities right across the country. But whilst they might initially have seemed the epitome of modern living, it turned out that many of them were cold, drafty, and really bad at maintaining heat. But those homes weren't destined to be chilly forever. A solution was devised that meant that homes could be retrofitted with the same toasty insulation as a brand new home built today. It was called cavity wall insulation, and of course it works by storing heat inside the two layers of wall that most modern properties are built with, then bouncing it back into the rooms. And while it should make things altogether more cosy and energy efficient, some people say that it's led to their homes suddenly looking like this.
It really started happening probably about Christmas last year. It was almost like a horror film.
I was very shocked when I first saw this and confused.
We first heard of one of these problems when Paul Scott Bates from Lancashire popped into our pop-up shop.
We've got damp on the inside walls and condensation.
And how bad is the damage?
It's quite bad. We have mould on the inside of the dining room wall, which isn't very nice when you're eating your meals.
We were intrigued, so we went to Paul's house to find out more. He'd had cavity wall insulation installed in 2010, and like many people, he got it free. In his case, it was under the government's now discontinued Green Deal scheme. But just a few months later, Paul noticed damp patches that had suddenly started appearing inside the house.
They're only small areas, so at the time, we just patched them up and redecorated, really not knowing where to go to investigate it further.
For 5 years, the couple lived with the damp, but in December 2015, the problems got so bad they just couldn't ignore them any longer.
I came downstairs one morning, I could hear a buzzing noise. Then I noticed water running down the wall, and water was going round the back of the plug socket, which is obviously what the buzzing was.
Other walls were now showing signs of damp as well, and over the next few weeks, they started to develop mould.
We have two small children, one of which is 15 months old, and again, you know, we worry that if we have mould in the house, is it affecting respiration, is it affecting our breathing, and is it affecting our health?
As all of this had started only after the cavity wall insulation had been fitted, it was clear to Paul that there must be a connection. But he'd been given no guarantee for the work by the company that installed it, which in any case was now out of business. So he was delighted to hear that there's an organisation that might be able to help. It's called the Cavity Insulation Guarantee Agency, CIGA for short, and it provides a 25-year guarantee for most installations of this type. And sure enough, when Paul got in touch, CIGA sent round a surveyor to inspect the damp. However, his report concluded that although Paul was right to suspect the problem was a result of his cavity wall insulation, it wasn't down to how it had been fitted. Instead, it pointed the finger at Paul and his family, saying that they had failed to ventilate the house properly or sufficiently maintain the outside walls.
And at that point, we really just thought we're just not getting anywhere with the body that we thought would really help us. We haven't been supported by CIGA. I don't think they've given us an accurate report.
Paul was particularly unhappy that the inspector's report hadn't addressed perhaps his biggest concern, whether the house had been suitable for cavity wall insulation in the first place. Because after doing some research, he was certain that it wasn't.
I believe, having investigated, that our house isn't suitable for cavity wall insulation on two accounts. One, that it is south-facing, and secondly, that it gets a lot of hard-driven rain and weather against the back of the house. Water will permeate through certain types of brick, particularly brick that we have in our house, because it's quite porous.
Previously, any water that seeped through the bricks would have stopped at the cavity. But with the insulation now filling that gap, any water that gets through the exterior wall seeps straight through to the interior walls of the house. It's for this reason that in some parts of the country, it's now recommended that cavity wall insulation should not be fitted in walls that bear the brunt of hard weather, such as some south-facing or particularly exposed walls. Although there was no mention of it in SIGA's report.
The SIGA auditor never once actually acknowledged the reason I'd asked them to come out, i.e. was the property suitable, never once said yes or no.
So with the report blaming the damp on a lack of maintenance, SIGA's guarantee wouldn't apply, leaving Paul with the cost of putting things right. And by the time the insulation's been removed and the damage repaired, he reckons that could run into several £1,000s.
It's very upsetting to us because we had the work done as part of a government scheme at no cost to us, thinking that we would make the house warmer, thinking that we'd save money on energy, thinking that it would be a little bit greener. But to find now that it's actually causing problems, it's a problem that we can't afford to have rectified.
We've heard from others who found themselves in a similar situation. For example, Karen Eastham. She lives 26 miles away from Paul in Preston. When Karen and her boyfriend bought their house in 2012, it had already been fitted with cavity wall insulation, but the damp and mould only started to appear later, after a prolonged wet spell.
I think it was alarm bells was ringing when we noticed the damp in the downstairs toilet, and then not long after that there was thick black mould on the wall and growing on the items in the cupboard as well. It's horrible.
Although Karen did have a guarantee from the company that had installed the insulation, it was no longer in business. So she too went to SIGA, which once again insisted that its guarantee wouldn't apply, as in Paul's case, saying the problems were because the walls hadn't been properly maintained. So it would be Karen that has to foot the bill, sorting it all out.
It worries me that we will have to, in the end, pay to take it out if they will not take responsibility, because we're talking thousands of pounds that we just don't have.
The same situation was facing Pauline Saunders 2 years ago, when she successfully fought to get her cavity wall insulation removed under SIGA's guarantee.
I had a massive battle, but due to my persistence and sheer effort and the amount of time I put in, I managed to win my case.
After that, Pauline set up the Cavity Insulation Victims Alliance to help other people in the same situation. In just 2 years, she's been contacted by more than 1,000 homeowners who now all regret having their insulation installed.
Because it's very easy to have installed, but it's very, very difficult to have it removed. And it's far more expensive to remove than it is to install.
Pauline is meeting both Paul and Karen to see if her experience can help them decide what to do next. And they've gone to Paul's house so that she can see the damage for herself.
Oh, Paul, look at that.
Yeah,
oh, that's absolutely dreadful.
And she very quickly forms the same opinion as Paul, that his house may not have been suitable for this type of insulation in the first place.
Now, let me get my facts straight now. That is south.
Yeah.
So you're catching all the wind-driven rain there.
Yeah.
You're really elevated.
Pauline believes it's unfair for homeowners to be accused of poor maintenance, when chances are they weren't told that they needed to do any.
Properties that had the insulation done more than 5 or 6 years ago, SIGA are tending to blame maintenance. But the thing is, there's nowhere on a guarantee that mentions that after you've had insulation, you need to keep your property in tip-top condition.
And whatever the cause, the mould is a potential health hazard.
That is really dreadful. I mean, especially if you've got children in the house.
Well,
it's really, really bad.
Pauline is hopeful she will be able to help, and she has plenty of other cases. But first, she wants to check exactly what was said in Paul and Karen's inspection reports.
We've had an inspection back in April, and they agree that it's caused the damage, but they're not willing to take responsibility, basically.
What was the reason they gave for not honouring the guarantee?
Lack of maintenance.
Right, OK.
But there's nothing in Karen's guarantee to suggest that maintenance may be an issue. In fact, it's not mentioned at all. Nor is there any evidence the installers left paperwork making a reference to the state of the wall at the time the insulation was fitted, which Pauline says SIGA would need in order to prove that it's been poorly looked after since.
Are they not meant to provide the customer with a copy of the pre-installation report?
Yes.
Because how do you prove the condition of the point in 2009?
Exactly.
With Karen at a stalemate with SIGA, Pauline believes the best solution is to appeal its decision through its alternative dispute resolution service, which helps settle disagreements like this one. And she thinks that's an option for Paul as well.
Demand your guarantee. You're entitled to your guarantee. A neighbour of mine, her installer had gone out of business. On her behalf, I contacted SIGA and they said, oh, there's no guarantee. We pushed and pushed and pushed, and SIGA reimbursed her there and then.
That's exactly the same as mine, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
The arbitration process will take several months, and there's no certainty of success. But however things ultimately turn out, all three have found the meeting very positive.
I can't guarantee anything, obviously, but it won't be through lack of trying if you don't get justice for them in the end.
It's really good to know there are people like Pauline out there who have been through the same experience, and they're there to offer help when the bigger companies don't want to help, really.
But when we spoke to SIGA, it was sticking to its guns that in both these cases, it's poor property maintenance to blame for the damp and mould, not defective cavity wall insulation or incorrect installation. And as a result, it can't accept liability for maintenance or repair work. SIGA says cavity wall insulation is an exceptionally reliable product, with only 2 in every 1,000 properties reporting problems. Despite that, it says the customer service experienced by Paul and Karen had fallen well below standard, and it's apologised for the distress and inconvenience caused. It has sent Paul a guarantee to cover any future problems it does agree are down to poor workmanship, and it's provided Paul and Karen with details of its arbitration scheme if they wish to pursue their current complaint, which of course is the route that both have decided already to take. And while they wait to see how that pans out, Paul and Karen would recommend that anyone thinking of having cavity wall insulation installed make sure that it's definitely right for their homes before going ahead.
I think if people are considering having cavity wall insulation fitted, I'd first of all do a little bit of homework, make sure that your property is suitable, and also ensure that you're given a full guarantee.